The Lindsay Clancy murder trial. We have finished week 1. If you see my last video, that was day 1. This one's covering the rest of the week because it can. That's how much happened. If you're not familiar with this case, this is Lindsay Clancy from Massachusetts, a mother who is on trial for first-degree emming her 3 young children. No one is contending whether that she did or did not do it. They say she did do it, however, that it was due to postpartum psychosis. Tragic case on so many levels. And the prosecution just drilled that one in just ad nauseum. Yeah, it got pretty intense. So we'll cover all of that. We have some interesting pictures to show. So let's get to it. If you're new here, I am Annette Lyon, USA Today bestselling author of the suspense novel, Just One More, and a whole bunch of other stuff. I'm also a Latter-day Saint and true crime junkie. And oftentimes we talk about both of those things where true crime and religion intersect. Not so much in this case, but we're covering this one because it is near and dear to my heart for other reasons, specifically the whole postpartum psychosis element. And stay tuned. I'm still, we're going to be posting my niece-in-law's interview with her experience with postpartum psychosis from several years ago and some of her views on that, her experience. You'll definitely want to tune in to that. Trial began July 27th. That was a Monday. There was no court on Tuesday. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we went through so many witnesses. It was just boom, 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 boom. And early days because they kind of kept running out of witnesses, largely because there was very little cross on that. Kevin Reddington, Lindsay's attorney, had nothing to cross on because these were cumulative witnesses. It was like every possible first responder, all of the doctors, and he actually had objected early on to having this many of those witnesses. And the prosecution said, so though every one of these children didn't matter, which is absolutely not the case. But the judge ruled that, he doesn't know what they'll be showing and presenting as evidence, and he'll deal with it as it comes along. And sure enough, it is so cumulative. It's the same events over and over and over. And it was really hard to listen to. Unfortunately for the prosecution, fortunately for Lindsay, I think that it was overkill. I think the jury is going to go, we got it. We understand. We got it the third time. Can we move on, please? And so I think the impact that the prosecution was shooting for probably got a bit diluted. Just, I guess. One interesting thing we discovered from Kevin Reddington, her lawyer, is that in her nightstand, there was a drawer where nothing was taken from it. The police didn't take some significant things. He actually submitted the drawer and its contents as evidence, and it was then admitted as such. In that drawer, there were several, I think there were 5, I believe, prescription bottles, all that have been prescribed to Lindsay between December and January, and all this happened in January. And she had been taking them. And they were actually completely empty, which shows that she did crush whatever was left in those bottles. She crushed it up and then drank it down as one more element of her trying to off herself before she threw herself out the window. And then also that she cut herself in the neck and then the wrists to facilitate that. Trying to be platform friendly in how we refer to these things. The drawer also had her Apple Watch, which the police did not take and look into. You think that might have given some insight, if nothing else, then into her lack of sleep, which was a huge part of her psychosis, most likely, in my opinion. There was also more of that pillow spray that was supposed to help her sleep. Again, she was trying desperately to sleep and couldn't, which is, again, huge red flags. So we have a lot of photographs that they went through that were very helpful in kind of being able to visualize what happened and what things looked like, including a lot of the interior of the house that shows it was a pretty modest house. And it was probably a pretty old house as well, especially being in Massachusetts, which dates back some of the earliest parts of U.S. history. Here we go with, first off, before we get to the house, the prosecution submitted 2 photographs that in their mind seemed to imply that Lindsay wasn't in distress one of the times that she was hospitalized. And this is not the night of the events, but when she was trying to seek psychiatric help and she was in the hospital, she took two selfies. And the way the prosecution made it sound was like a teenager doing like the duck lips kind of thing and posting it to Instagram and like, oh, I'm so cute, this is so great, or whatever. No, here's the two pictures she posted, or she took, or I don't know if she posted them, but it's two selfies that she took of herself. Yeah. Wearing a mask and a gown. Like, I can see her taking pictures, sending this to family, going, well, I'm in the hospital, let's hope they can figure this out. That does not look like I'm so cute, look at my great life. And then the other one, technically a selfie because it's her feet, but also it's like, yeah, I'm bored, or I don't know, I'm really depressed. I mean, this is not, I'm having fun with my camera. Hardly. Okay, so some other things that they discovered in the house. This is a book that she had that she was reading. Good Moms Have Scary Thoughts. This is a book for mothers coping with postpartum anxiety. I have heard from women who have had postpartum anxiety, and that includes like flashes of images or thoughts of hurting their children, and they are horrified. I would never do that to my child, but what if I will? Oh my goodness. This fear surrounding the children's safety and that they might be the one to harm their child. She was having those thoughts. And she was even reaching out, trying to find solutions and resources. Good moms have scary thoughts. That says so much. And this other one, the Pregnancy and Postpartum Anxiety Workbook. She wasn't just trying to find help with medication and doctors. She was doing work on her own. She was reaching out to her husband, reaching out to her mother. She was talking about it and desperately trying to get help, trying to find a way to sleep, even saying, okay, I guess one of the older kids would get up at night still. And so it was waking her up even more. So she goes, hey, honey, would you sleep down in the basement for a little while? And maybe you can get up with the kids and I'll just be with the baby. Maybe that'll help. I mean, they were trying all kinds of things just to help her sleep, because sleep deprivation is a big, whether it's a contributing factor or an aggravating factor or a red flag that psychosis is on its way, it was a big problem. And she was trying to address all of it. It's heartbreaking. Okay, this was the medication list, because her attorney, I really like him, but he is old school. He does not do like PowerPoints. I wish he would. We had all of these big posters. So this is a poster he showed showing her various medications. Let's back up a little bit so you can see it more if you'd like to zoom in on that. I was surprised to see how many of them, so these are prescriptions from like October through January of when all of this went down. And most of them are anti-anxiety meds, like diazepam, which is generic for Valium, or lorazepam, which is a more modern one. The diazepam is an older medication. There were some antidepressants in there, but it seems like the most common antidepressants, or that we see like Prozac type things, were earlier in there, and then toward the bottom, the only one that I recognized was amitriptyline. That's a pretty mild one, and it potentially can make you drowsy, which is why oftentimes it's given at night when you're that's why. Also, trazodone is often given to help people sleep, especially if they have an anxiety disorder, which applies. Although it was originally, this is a weird research I've done in the past for my writing and whatnot, trazodone was originally approved as an antidepressant, but it's very short acting and it makes people fall asleep. So it worked well in the sense that if you stayed awake, you felt better, but it just knocked you right out. Basically now it's usually given just as a sleep aid for anxiety, people who cannot get to sleep. So she had a lot of trazodone, but I was surprised to see so much like lorazepam, diazepam, and then amitriptyline right there at the end. So they talk about, they had Patrick on the stand describing everything that had happened. And so Patrick is her then husband. They've since divorced and he has since remarried. But he went out to run the errands to CVS to get their daughter some children's laxative, and then to get some takeout for dinner, and then came back. And again, this prosecution keeps trying to make a big deal out of the fact that she sent him far away. It was 5 miles. It was not very far. And I can see her wanting just a change in pace, and the voices and psychosis in her head took advantage of it, but I do not think this was like some big premeditated scheme, especially because she was so devoted even earlier that day making a snowman with her kids. Like, it just does not fit someone who just was desperate to escape her life. She wanted to be a mother and she wanted to fix this. But anyway, he comes home and they showed a picture of the front of the house. Again, not this big fancy schmancy thing. He parks and then goes in this other door. So this is the frame of the house, but like you scooch over, then you can see the garage, which looks like it was added to the house later. And that's the door he went in right next to the garage. He comes into the house and the place is just eerily silent. And when you've got 3 young kids, what? Like 5 and under. So he's calling out and he hears nothing. And he thinks, did she go somewhere? So he peeks out of the window or out the door and trying to see her car in the driveway. But her car is black. You can see that in the picture. So he couldn't see her car, but he didn't know she was actually gone. This is odd. So he actually even called down to down into the basement because the light was on and he tends to keep the light off. But nobody answered. Of course, now we know the children were down there and deceased. So let's show inside the house. So he gets inside the house. This is their kitchen. As you can tell, nothing fancy. In fact, he said that's the kitchen table he grew up with as a kid. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, we had that exact table when we got our first house in 1995. Yeah, I think I have kids his age. Like, yeah, that tracks. And we still have that table, actually. And it's not our dining table at this point, but we have that table. And it was not expensive, but it's what we could afford at the time. So this is their kitchen and their little dining area. And you can see the bag there in the front. That was their takeout bag. I'm looking up close. That's another picture for the police took. You can see 3V on the paper bag. That was their food, and the CVS bag of the children's laxative and the Skittles he bought. And I had to wonder where the Skittles for Cora, because the laxative was for her. We don't know, but we know he bought Skittles and the laxative. I have to wonder if he bought them for Cora. Like, you don't like medicine, but here's some Skittles to make it better. Which makes me so sad. So he runs up to the master bedroom, and the way he described it on the stand, that it looked like blood had been just sprayed everywhere like a hose. So there was a lot of blood. And that the window was open. We see pictures of her nightstand, which you can't really see in this picture. And I am assuming it's to the left of the picture. But so yeah, he runs in there. I'm not going to show a whole bunch of gruesome pictures, but we'll just do this one that there's some of the splatter you can kind of see, just some of it. So he runs, he looks out the window and realizes she's outside on the ground. So he runs out through the sliding doors, which I'll show you in a second. This is the backyard, but it's if you're looking at the front of the house, you're going around the left side of the house, and then this is what you would see in the backyard. And I believe this is the fence, which I believe if you're coming around to the backyard, that would be on your left, and the house is on your right. My understanding is how it was laid out. And this is if you turn the corner, this is how you'd see the back of the house, and that right there is the master bedroom window. She flung herself out, and you can tell that it's open. Look at other windows that are closed and how the shadows are different there. You can see the light coming through, all of that. Okay, so here is the actual back of the house, a little more zoomed out. I'll zoom in on that so you can see it better. I've labeled all of the windows there. He said Jocelyn's bedroom, there's an upstairs bathroom, the master bedroom again, kitchen, bathroom from the downstairs, and then the living room. And apparently from the bathroom downstairs, if you walked out, then you'd be, I believe, facing the stairs that go down into the basement. Now I can see that the addition that was added to the house, it looks like that's where the kitchen table is, and that's where some sliding doors were. And that's where he comes out the master bedroom, comes out the sliding doors into the backyard, and finds her on the ground. She's kind of incoherent and moaning. And he says, what happened? And she said, I tried to kill myself, but she's not really coherent at this point. And he calls 911. They arrive. When they had so many people, so many EMTs on the stand and repeating things over and over and over, several of who saw her as well as the kids. And one thing the prosecution kept harping on was that she wasn't actively like hemorrhaging on the ground at the time. Which does sound like, oh, maybe she didn't cut herself deep enough, except that in the master bedroom, it was everywhere. So Reddington made a really good point here, is that it was very, very cold. They had a massive storm recently. It was very cold in the middle of January in Massachusetts. And we're not sure how long she was there, lying there exactly, but we do know that as the body gets cold, that can slow down the heart rate and slows down bleeding. I learned a lot about that one actually when I was researching a World War II book set in Finland during the Winter War, and how that actually saved a lot of soldiers' lives. In fact, hypothermia, because they would not then bleed out before they could get help. So that was, in my opinion, that is a valid explanation as to why she wasn't bleeding heavily on the ground. And then by the time she got to the hospital, enough clotting had happened that she wasn't in danger of bleeding out in that moment. We did learn, however, that while she was in the hospital that first night, she coded. We learned that from a police officer who was there guarding her, that she coded. It was a code blue, which means basically she died and was revived or was on the process of dying. It was a code blue. So, yeah, she would have, this was not a fake attempt. This was an absolute legitimate attempt to take her life. Going back to what happened there, she goes, where's the kids? And once paramedics arrive and are helping her, and she says they're in the basement, he goes, I'm going to check on my kids. You guys have my wife. He runs down to the basement, still on 911, although it sounds like he didn't realize he was. And we did not hear that. Thank freaking heavens. I would not have wanted to hear it, and it sounds like it was horrifying. We saw Lindsay's reaction in court. She was visibly sniffing, and not just like wiping tears, but it was like snot cry. There were real tears there. And her whole body was just shaking. Her shoulders were shaking. Just hearing her husband discovering what had happened. And then she cried again later in the week when the EMTs were describing how they found her children and trying to resuscitate them. Even like how you do CPR differently on an infant versus a child, how you wrap your hands around and you use your thumbs, and just it was hard to hear. But again, there was so much repetition that it just I think the jury may have kind of checked out, because like, we've heard enough, we get it, we know what happened. Do we need to hear this again? I could see them just kind of like, stop. Can we please stop now? This is too much. We heard from at least one firefighter, several police officers, paramedics, and then the next day we're hearing from actual doctors at various hospitals who treated various children. We know the baby, the 8-month-old, that they were able to get a heartbeat on him, and unfortunately never got brain activity back, but his heart was beating for a couple of days before he passed. So they flighted him to a children's hospital where he was on life support, but he never had brain activity from the time they arrived at the hospital. I believe it was, I think it was with him, one of the children anyway. One of the doctors said that they worked for 40 minutes to get, no, this was with Dawson, the older boy. They worked for 40 minutes at the ER trying to revive him with all of the medications and the CPR and the pumping oxygen, the bag and all of the different things. And that was in addition to the efforts that had been made at the house and en route in the ambulance. There was a valiant effort, but there was just no possibility of restarting his heart or getting anything going back in his brain. And that's actually remarkable too, that they tried as long as they did in his case specifically, because Patrick on the stand said that when he saw Dawson, he knew he was gone. And yet they still tried for essentially an hour, if you count the house, the ambulance, and the hospital. That's just brutal. And I bless all of those medical workers and first responders who work cases like this. I can't imagine the trauma they must relive on a daily basis. I just can't even. Something else here. So the prosecution kept pointing out as well that like they said that she jumped from 20 feet. It was a 20-foot ball. But look, from the bottom of the window to the ground, it's only 12 feet. And okay, possibly technically from the bottom of the windowsill to the ground, I'll trust that they measured it 12 feet. But if you're an adult and you're standing on a windowsill and you jump and her head and neck got the brunt of the injury, they didn't fall from 12 feet. They fell from more than that, right? Like 16 maybe. Maybe not 20, which is what they said. It could have been, I mean, I think at least 16 minimum, maybe even 18. But did they measure from the top of the windowsill? Because her feet is where they measured. So I feel like the prosecution is just like kind of saying things that are technically true, but spinning them in a way that's like, okay, yeah, but come on, really? Kind of like the selfies. Like, she's not a 14-year-old going, I'm in the hospital. No, that's not what we're doing. We also saw images of Lindsay's own journals. Apparently, she loved to keep track of everything. So she tracked her medications, her responses to medications, her dosing, which shows that she was faithful in taking her medications. But she would say things like she would say, slept well, and that was noteworthy. But I woke up and had horrible thoughts this morning. And then she would be tracking things like that regularly. It sounds like she liked to track things, and that fits for someone who is a perfectionist and a high achiever and wants to figure out what's going on. And the prosecution made it sound like somehow this record was, I don't know, devious, or I don't know. It made it sound like it was a bad thing, and rather than a mother trying to figure it out and make a record. And to me, it was she tried so hard, and her brain just fell apart. On Friday morning, they had what they call the jury view, which was basically a field trip. They took them in a bus, the jury, to the CVS, to the 3B restaurant where they got the takeout, and then to the house. The new owner was against it, did not want them there, but court order, they had no choice in the matter. And so they kept the press out, only those listed in the order. So the jury and the lawyers and whoever court staff was allowed to go in. The jury went in 6 at a time, so 3 batches of 6. The press was kept 100 yards away, obviously to protect the jury, and so they couldn't go see the scene themselves. I'm surprised that the judge allowed this, because you would think, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but you would think that this type of view, field trip, whatever you want to call it, would be done specifically in cases where we don't have a good way to express how things happened or the layout of a place without actually being there. But I didn't even show all of it, but they even had like a floor plan that was like a 3D floor plan that they put up. And then they had this, and I mean, all of it, so many pictures, even of the basement, which I'm not showing that because that's too hard. And the exercise bands, which were used around the children's necks. We have a very good idea of how this house was laid out and what happened. And yet they still went into the CVS. Why the CVS? Why the restaurant? Like, it's so odd to me that the judge agreed to let that happen, and that the prosecution could argue that they needed to see this to be able to decide the facts of the case. That's just so bizarre to me. It felt very cumulative, as well as so many of these witnesses, and they buzzed through. I think on one day there were like 10 witnesses. That doesn't happen. Like, I mean, Patrick himself was on the stand for 2 days. It's wild, but part of the reason is because A, it was just the same story over and over again, and so there's only so much they can say, and then B, Reddington didn't have much to cross on because they don't dispute the medical facts of the children's death. They don't dispute that. So he might have had a couple of questions here and there that like addressed the hypothermia possibility and things like that, but he had very little cross. And so they just zoomed through things and had court ended early, I believe, on all 3 of those days, for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Even with the view on Friday, it was so strange to me. So I'm not going to go into all the gory details that the paramedics and all the first responders went into, the doctor. If you really want the gory details, you can find them. But suffice it to say, there were valiant efforts to try to get these children alive, but there just wasn't a choice. And I think, as I mentioned in my last video, strangulation is generally a very up close and personal and very vicious kind of thing, because you have to be in their face for several minutes, 5 to 6 minutes, they always say, to make this happen. But that wasn't the case here. She used exercise bands tied around their necks, which would be a pretty quick thing to do. And then she would move on to the next kid and the next, and then run upstairs and do her own thing. So her brain could have totally still been broken. She didn't need 15 minutes across 3 kids to make this happen. If she would have needed that kind of time, I think she might have been able to snap out of it, or I think it might have taken too long for her mother brain to be offline that long. Again, I'm not an expert in these things, but she is not the monster some people are portraying her to be. And so anyway, I personally have a lot of compassion for her. I hope she gets the medical help that she needs rather than being stuck in jail for the rest of her life. At this point, I'm getting annoyed with Shanann Buckingham, the assistant DA who's doing most of the prosecution, because she just seems to be taking cheap shots at motherhood in general, and that just doesn't sit well with me. So if I do get snarky in this case, it'll probably be about Shanann Buckingham. It will not be about Lindsay or the medical helpers, first responders. I'm probably not about Kevin Reddington, because at this point, I really respect her lawyer. He's doing an amazing job all by himself. The only thing is, again, I wish he would do his PowerPoint rather than just a bunch of posters, but visuals help. I mean, the posters are better than no visuals. So far, he's doing a great job. And I believe, again, the judge is doing a pretty good job, too. So, may justice be served. And in this case, it's a tough one to know exactly what that would look like. But I'm glad that the jury can decide, is it the big M? And if so, what degree? Because she's charged with first degree. They can actually give her a lower degree, which I think is incredibly compassionate of Massachusetts to do. And I hope other states would do that as well. That seems like a really good thing. Because if they say, yes, I think she's guilty, but not to the same, she doesn't deserve the same punishment as, say a serial killer or, a Yahtzee or something. Because that's a problem that we see in our criminal justice system. In fact, I had a brother-in-law who was asking me my opinion because of my channel, and I have opinions, obviously, and I've done a lot of research. He was saying, well, why should anyone who's committed ever get a chance at parole? And I pointed out various cases where the facts, because you think M and you're like, whoa, that's the worst thing ever. But something can technically be homicide and yet not be as egregious as other ones. There's certain ones, that's why there's aggravating factors. That's why some things are eligible for the D penalty and others are not. There's one case, I don't remember where it was, but there's a Netflix series called I Am a Murderer, I'm a Killer. Anyway, and every episode covers someone who technically took someone's life and what their story is behind it. And there is such a range from absolute sociopaths to a woman who took her husband's life literally out of self-defense. And the only reason she's in jail is because she hid the body because she was scared. So she was charged with like desecration of a body and lying to police or something. So she got like a 4 or 5 year sentence, but not on M. But technically, did she kill someone? Yeah, she did. But this other case that was in the same series was this guy who facilitated a drug sale with his friend, and his friend then died from the drug overdose. He himself wasn't taking the drugs. He didn't die, but he had driven his friend to the drug dealer and was in the car when it happened. And then his friend OD'd. And then he took his friend to the ER and his friend still died. But because he was part of that whole, you brought him there, he was charged with the same level of M as a serial killer, torturer, whatever. And now he got the same sentence as the worst of the worst of the worst. And yet, if he had just let his friend die on the side of the road, he might not have even been charged. But he tried to do the right thing, going to the hospital and bringing his friend to the ER. Friend still died, and they held him liable for actual first-degree M. Make it make sense. So I think having a little bit more nuance in the system can only be a good thing. I don't think Lindsay Clancy is anywhere near the monster that some people believe she is, but she probably does need mental help, and whatnot. And now, or possibly in the future and ongoing, who knows? That's up to professionals to determine. But I suspect that she will be punishing herself for the rest of her life for all of that. That's basically days 2, 3, and 4, Wednesday through Friday, of the Lindsay Clancy trial, first week in the back. They said they were guessing it would be 5 to 6 weeks long, the entire trial. I doubt it. I think we're looking at, I don't know, 3 or 4. It's hard to know because I have no idea how many witnesses they'll actually call. The prosecution had a huge amount of witnesses on their list, but they went through 10 in a day. So even if they called all of their witnesses, it still, I don't think, would take 6 weeks. But I don't know. Who knows what the defense will do? We shall see. It's, again, an absolute tragic case. And my heart goes out to the entire family. So as we go through this, I just want to make sure we remember Cora, Dawson, and Callan, who are the victims in this more than anybody else, and honor their memory and their very short lives. Keep things respectful in the comments. You can disagree, but don't be cruel and don't be rude and mean and any of that stuff. So let me know what you think. If you're like me, after heavy things like this, I may need to go get like a piece of chocolate or a cup of hot cocoa, even though it's hot and it's summer. Sometimes that's just a comfort food. Get something little to comfort yourself because it's a lot. And we've got another big week ahead of us. So stay tuned and let me know what you think. We'll catch you next time.